All right, we're in Acts 28th chapter. We're down to verse 11. And tonight and tomorrow, or next week. And let me ask you what you want to do next week's Bible school. And I'm sure that some of you are working in it and helping in it, and I want you to do that. But we can meet. We can't meet in here, but we could meet in the Jolly Seniors class. I think there's enough chairs in there. Won't be cookies and punch, but it'll just be the bread of the Word. It's the only bread you'll get that night. Are there enough of us to meet? Is what I'm asking you. How many of you would come? Okay, all right. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay. And if you're obligated with Bible school, I want you to do that. And but the rest of us will finish out this 28th chapter next Wednesday, and we'll meet down there in that room down the left-hand side in the sanctuary next week. Okay, at our regular time. All right, Acts 28, down to verse number 11. It begins this way: After 3 months, we sailed in an Alexandrian ship whose figurehead was the twin brothers, which had wintered at the island. And landing at Syracuse, we stayed 3 days. That's not Syracuse, New York. From there, we circled around and reached, however you say that word, Rhegium. After 1 day, the south wind blew, and the next day we came to Puteoli, where we found brethren, and were invited to stay with them 7 days. And so we went toward Rome. And from there, when the brethren heard about us, they came to meet us as far as, however you say that word, Forum, and 3 inns or taverns. When Paul saw them, he thanked God and took courage. Now when we came to Rome, the centurion delivered the prisoners to the captain of the guard, but Paul was permitted to dwell by himself with the soldier who guarded him. There was a magazine article in the Christian Science Monitor, I think was the name of the magazine, and it was an article entitled, "Who Walked the Roads of Rome?" or to Rome. It is estimated that there were somewhere between 50 and 60,000 miles of roads around Rome. Most of those roads were used for military purposes. They were about 12 to 15 feet wide and different things. And you know, it wasn't just for people to run to the Valero station down on the corner. Mostly it was just because they were the military might, and that's what they usually use those roads for. But some of those roads were used by people who migrated to Rome. And so many years later, there was this study, is what this article was about. And these two people, they made this study about who traveled these roads. And the way that they figured this out is that they go out there and they begin to excavate where these roads were, and they would find teeth and different things, and they would, however you do this, they would study those teeth, and they would find stuff, I guess, in those teeth, and they would figure out where these people came from as they migrated to Rome, and they could tell all of those things about those people that finished their life. Well, here in this middle section of the 28th chapter of the book of Acts, we read about what may have been the most famous migration to Rome. And it's finally to this point that the Apostle Paul, who I think we first read about it back in the 19th chapter or so, we find that first he just set his heart that he wanted to go to Rome. And then later we find the voice of God told him, he said, "You're going to go to Rome." And so we've seen all of these things. Well, finally, we get to the place where the Apostle Paul, who has been talking about it and planning on it and looking forward to it, he finally makes it. Now, I don't think that he makes it like he thought he would make it when he first thought about it. I think that when he first thought about going back to Rome, that he thought that he would go, as he was at many of these places where he went on these missionary journeys, and that was he would go as a missionary, or he would go as a preacher. Well, he doesn't get there as that. He comes back to Rome as what? He's a prisoner. Okay? He's a prisoner of the Caesar. So the few verses in this little passage tonight, these 5 verses or so that we look at tonight, they don't seem all that significant, and there's not a lot of action that takes place in these verses, but they're really the climatic moment of all of the events, of the things that he's been talking about and looking forward to. This is the climatic moment of the book. So when Luke, who's been busily writing and keeping notes and doing all of these things, when he finally gets to the place where he can write, depending on your translation, it might say, and so we come, or we came to Rome, or now when we came to Rome. It is the culmination of quite a journey. And you can see what a journey it is, not just in what we've talked about over the past few weeks after that 3rd missionary journey, but you can go back to that. It's the last map in my Bible, and probably is in yours, that maps out all 3 missionary journeys. And then we have that trek of where he leaves Caesarea and he's headed toward Rome. And it has been a very eventful and journey that he has been on. So here's the way I want us to look at this tonight. As we know from the things that Paul has said and the things that he's talked about now for quite some time, that he's been looking forward to getting to Rome. Now, our Rome may not necessarily be a point on a map. It may not be a place that we can go to and stick a thumbtack in that map and say, this is where I want to get to one of these days, and this is where I want to get to a place in my life as something important. But it may not be a location. It may just be the next stage of our life. And most of us are old enough to know that life has stages. And your Rome, my Rome, it may not be the ending place as it's going to be or we believe it's going to be for Paul, but it may just be the next stage of our life from where we're going right now. But here's the deal. Whether it is the ending place or whether it is just the next place that we will go to in our life, if we are truly following Him, and He leads us how? It's not by the maps in the back of the book. He leads us through the presence of His Holy Spirit. And as He leads us, and if we're truly following Him, then He is leading us somewhere to do something. Because we learned last week, what did we learn? Don't be a tourist. Don't be a tourist. He's leading us somewhere to do something. And you can add this on there as well. It won't be for your honor and glory. It will be for His. That's what happens when He leads us. So here we go. Let's go through these 3 things that are on your outline. There's a mistake on the outline. And the mistake is under Roman numeral 1, letter B. It's not supposed to be what on B. It's supposed to be who. So make that change if you're going to fill out your outline, and it'll make a little sense. Now, just to give you an idea, we know that Paul's been traveling now for a number of years. It is estimated by some that Paul has traveled as much as 15 to 16,000 miles. And when you think about the mode of transportation then as compared to the mode of transportation today, that's a long way. And so he's traveled as many as 15,000 or so miles. He has been saved for 25 or so years, give or take 1 or 2. He's been preaching for 20, 21, 22 or so years. He's now 60-ish years of age. So he's been at this for a long, long time, and he's been busy for the Lord. So here's what I want us to see about this. As we're going where He leads us, okay, it's not about Paul. As we are going where the Father leads us, we're reminded in this passage of Scripture of why we get there. Why we get there. Now remember last week they were on this island of Melita or Malta. And they stayed there for how long? 3 months. Okay, they stayed there. They kind of winter there. They had the shipwreck. They wind up there. And so Paul and his traveling companions, that they have finally found another ship that's going to go to Rome. So they board this ship. It's a ship out of Alexandria. It's a large ship. Now we don't know why Luke tells us the things that Luke tells us. But what Luke does here is he goes to what we would call great lengths to identify or explain to us about the identity of this ship that they're going to travel on. We don't know for certain that all 276 that were on the other leg of the journey, we don't know if all 276 get on this boat. It may well have been that Julius, who is the guard, the Roman guard, that he and the guard that's under him actually doing the guarding of the prisoners, that he and some of the prisoners, that they may have been the only ones that got on there, but we don't know because Luke doesn't deem it important, or I'm sorry, not Luke, the Holy Spirit doesn't deem it important enough to talk about that, but he does deem it important enough to tell us some things about this ship. So what does he tell us about this ship? Well, when Paul gets to Rome, he got there not simply because of the shipping routes and a specific route that they laid on, because we found in the last couple of weeks that Paul winds up going to some places that they were not on the manifesto. Okay, they weren't on the travel log when he leaves Caesarea. So when he gets there, it's not because of the shipping routes, and it's not because of the Roman roads. He gets there for this reason. Now listen to this, because this is vitally important. He gets there because the hand of God has led him there. How many, and I'm afraid most of us have done this. I know that I have. You come to a place then you just make the statement, I don't know how I got here. You ever done that? I don't know how I got to this place in my life. Don't know how I got to this juncture. I don't know how I got to this place. Well, it's really simple. Because the Scripture tells us that the steps of a good man or a godly man are ordered by whom? By the Lord. The steps of a godly man are ordered by the Lord. So all of these places that Paul goes, and all of these places that he didn't necessarily intend to go, some of them he just wound up there because the wind, which is under the control of God, the wind blew the ship in a particular direction that they didn't intend to go, and they wound up somewhere that wasn't on the trip, but they wound up there because God led them there. And the same thing is true in your life and mine. We don't wind up anywhere by accident. We wind up in places in our life because God leads us there. So what does Luke tell us about this ship? Well, he tells us what was on the ship. We know at one time on one of the ships, this was some time ago, that they had a lot of grain, because when one of those storms come, what did they do with all that grain? They chunked it. Okay, they tried to lighten the load. So we're not talking about what, as in what cargo was on the ship. We're talking about what was on the ship. Well, in the 11th verse, Luke tells us that they set sail in a ship of Alexandria, and that ship had wintered over in Malta or Melita, where Paul had been. And he also said this ship had a sign on it. And the sign on this ship, it would kind of be like I don't know if it was carved into the front bow of the ship, or if it was literally a sign that would have been posted there. But it was a sign that said one of two things: either twin boys or Castor and Pollux. Now, Castor and Pollux were the mythological twin sons of Zeus. And the image of these two boys, it was either their name was painted there, their image could have been painted there, or their image could have been carved into the front of the ship. But it was Castor and Pollux, the mythological twin sons of Zeus. That was quite literally the name of the ship. Now, you say, well, who were they? Well, Castor and Pollux were thought. Okay, this is all mythological stuff. They were thought to be special gods, little g, special gods of the sailors and the ships, and they were believed in the mythological culture, they were believed to provide protection during storms and all of these things that happen at sea. Now, there is a poem, and I don't know the name of it, but there's a poem by Horace, and in that poem, Horace credits the twin brothers, Castor and Pollux, for guiding, and in that poem he says, for guiding my little boat, and then also through the wild Aegean Sea. Now, we know that this portion of the world, that they were very superstitious. Now, we don't know how superstitious the crew that was on this particular ship is, and we don't know any of those things, but perhaps, and it's very possible, that the captain of the ship, of the boat, that he may well have said before they departed Melita, that he may well have said a prayer to the little g gods, Castor and Pollux, to provide them safety on this journey that they were on as they went there. So what was on the ship was a symbol, a picture of lostness and blindness of the people of that day, because much like people in our day today, you see, there are still many little g gods in our culture. Anything that we put our faith and trust in is a god. There's only one big G God, and that's Him. But even today, people still have a lot of little g gods that they put before the big G God. And what happened here was this. That's what was on this ship. Now here's the mistake. Letter B. Who was over the ship? Well, we can be sure that when Paul gets on, when he gets ready to leave Melita, when he gets on, he doesn't say a prayer to Castor and Pollux. We know that he doesn't go through and do some hocus pocus, yada yada yada, some kind of something that praying that Castor and Pollux would give him a safe journey. He doesn't place any trust in the gods of this world, even though. And how many times have our kids come to us, and we went to our parents when we were kids many years ago, and we said something along this line: everybody's doing it. Brother Palmer, did y'all say that when you were kids to your mom and dad? I figured it had been around a long time. Well, here's Paul. And Paul is pretty much surrounded by people that they believed in Castor and Pollux. They believed in the mythological mess that was going on. So even though, and here's the lesson for all of us, even though he was surrounded by it, he didn't do it. He didn't do it. When they landed at Syracuse, which was about an 80-mile journey. Syracuse is the capital of the little island of Sicily, and then they went another 70 miles, I think it is, and they get to Rhegium or whatever it is, and then they went around they get into the Strait of Messina, and the south wind catches the ship, and we know they fought the wind 3 months ago when they wound up over here at Melita or Malta. They fought the wind there, but here they catch the south wind. And the south wind here, man, it carries them to where they need to be. And Paul knew those people on that ship running around, they may have walked around and they may have said, man, Castor and Pollux are being good to us today. But Paul knew Castor and Pollux didn't have anything to do with it. Paul knew that it was the hand of the sovereign God. You say, well, how does Paul know that if he lived around a culture that believed what they believed? Here's the reason: because for the last 12 or 15 or so years, as Paul has been on these different journeys, Paul has seen the sovereign hand of the Lord steering his ship. And Paul has heard. He has heard the assuring voice of Jesus telling him not to fear, that everything was, that he was going to make it to Rome. And listen, when he finally gets there, he knows good and well why he made it. He made it because the unseen, yet felt, by Paul anyway, hand of God brought him there. When you come to your room, when you come to the next stage in your life, or the final stage in your life where God wants you to be, don't take your glasses off and rub your eyes and say, well, bless God, I don't know how I got here. You remember this story. And you get there because He leads us there. And He directs us, and He guides us, and He delivers us. And I'm telling you, who was over that ship? It was God. It was God who was over that ship. You remember the song? The old hymn? And the middle, I think it's 3, I don't know if it's 3 verses or 4 verses, but one of the middle verses, it's either 2 or 3, it makes this statement. It says, He leadeth me. Oh, blessed thought. Oh, words of heavenly comfort brought. Now listen to this line. Whate'er I do, where'er I be, still 'tis God's hand that leadeth me. I'm telling you, who was over that ship? It was God. And when we get to where He is leading us, then we can say with full assurance, I'm not here by accident. I'm not here by chance. I didn't just happen here. I'm here because He leadeth me. And this is where He led me to. So here's Roman numeral 2. We see why we get there. Well, let's look at what happens while we get there. While we get there. Now Luke, he's been writing and doing all these things, and things are moving quickly. They're now getting to Rome, but he still tells us some details about the trip that I don't know that we would have made note of these things. But anyway, on the way to Rome, the Lord, He ordered these events. Now that verse that I mentioned is Psalm 37:23, that the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. Okay, the Lord ordered all of these events. The Lord ordered for Paul's and his, whether he was traveling by ship or whether he was traveling by foot, the Lord ordered him to be in all of these different places, even though Paul did not necessarily plan to be in all of these different places. So He used them. Okay? Now, get this, you may need to write this down. There are 0 mistakes with God. 0. None. Here's what God would do. And listen, remember, He's the same. Yesterday, today, and forevermore. Now, He would take these unplanned, they weren't on the travel manifesto, they weren't on the pamphlet that Paul got when he bought and paid for a trip on this cruise that he was going to go on. It wasn't a part of the plan. But God sent him to different places. And Paul would meet people. Paul would experience things. And you know what God was doing? God was using those people, and God was using those experiences to prepare him for what was coming down the road that Paul didn't know where that road was going to be. And God does the same thing today. God doesn't lead us in places by mistake. He leads us to certain places, and while we're on the journey to get to whatever our ultimate, and all of our ultimate journey, we all want to wind up in heaven one day, but we've got a journey to make before we get there. And while we're on the way, while we get there, He is going to lead us and guide us and move us from here to here to here. And we're going to find people, and we're going to meet people, and they're going to minister to us. We're going to have opportunity to minister to them. And then somewhere down the road, God is going to use that for something else. Can I tell these people you're my school teacher? Can I?
You just did.
I didn't tell them what grade. I could tell them my senior year teacher. Miss Wilson was the first school teacher I ever had. She taught me in the first grade in 1969 at Hurdy Elementary School. Now, I still have this picture. It's in my office. In fact, I just showed it to Jen and J.W.'s son up at the funeral home a while ago. And I've got this picture. I pretty well look the same. My hair's a little longer. My daddy made me have a bird. I say that to say this. God moves us in certain places. I'm sure that I was in that class so that I would learn to spell the rest of my last name. Had I not been in Miss Wilson's first grade class, I would have probably wrote Steve Cow for the rest of my life. But bless God, she taught me to put that ART on the end of it, and man, I had it conquered. God leads us in certain places with certain people at certain times for certain things, and they may not make sense when it happens. But somewhere down the road, it is very possible that He is going to use what He did 47 years ago to accomplish something else that He wants to do. I'm telling you, there is no wasted time on this journey. So, let me give you two thoughts about this. God gives us the stops we need. In verse 13, Luke tells us this. He said, the next day, we came to this place called Puteoli, or however you say that. Puteoli is the principal, the main port of what is today Naples. So you find Naples on a current map, and Puteoli was the principal port of that place. So they had finally reached Italy. It's right there on the tip of the boot. And they had finally reached Italy, and all that stood between them and Rome was a good, straight road and a pretty good walk. They were going to have to make a walk. But then in verse 14, look what it says. It says, where we found brethren, and were invited to stay with them for 7 days. And so we went toward Rome. Now this is an interesting detail. Can you imagine how eager the Roman captain, can you imagine how eager Julius is to get this crew of prisoners? Because remember, man, they're responsible. That they lose prisoners could very well happen. So he is eager to get this group of prisoners delivered to where he's supposed to be, and so he's ready to go. And I'm pretty sure that Paul is pretty eager to get there because he has heard from the proverbial voice of God that he's going to Rome, and so we know that he has to be eager. But here along the way, they meet a group of believers. And this group of believers, they said, man, why don't you just stay a few days? Why don't you just spend the week with us? And so these believers, man, they were excited to meet Paul. Paul's kind of a rock star. And they're excited to meet Paul. They're excited to hear from him. They're excited to fellowship with him. And listen, we've seen before in Paul's journey that these meetings that he has, these communions that he has with the saints, that they met along the way, these things happened almost all the time. And Rome was going to be there in a week, because Rome was 800 years old. As a city, Rome has been in existence for a little over 800 years. So in 7 days, odds are pretty good that Rome will be there when that happens. Now, perhaps we know that Jesus is leading us, and He is directing us in our life, but we feel like that, and sometimes we feel like that somebody just comes along and they impede our progress. Well, it may be, now listen to me, it may be that person has been sent by God. Let's be honest. Maybe I'll be the only one that'll be honest. But sometimes you're busy doing something, and somebody comes along, and they're not an important person. They're not a mover and a shaker. And the thought runs through your mind, why did you have to come along today? I'm in a hurry. I've got to get this done. I've got to get that done. I've got to get to this place. And it may be that God sent them into your life. Maybe it's for you to help them, but it may be that they're going to be a blessing to you. And listen, God, just know this. God gives us the stops. Okay? God gives us the stops. But God also gives us the strength. He gives us the strength. Now, after they spend a week at Puteoli, or whatever that place is, they start up the Appian Way. And the Bible says it's the main, or teaches us that it's the main road that leads north into the city of Rome. Then in verse 15, here's what the Bible says. From there, when the brethren heard about us, they came to meet us as far as Appii Forum and the three taverns. Now the forum here at Appius, that's about it's between 40 and 45 miles out. Okay, from the destination they want to get to, it's about 45 or so miles out. Then it talks about this three taverns or this other place. It's about 30 or so miles. So it's a few more miles. So God, He sends these groups of people. Now, look what Paul tells us about this greeting that he receives, that he talks about in the beginning of verse 15. Look at the end of verse 15. It says, when Paul saw them, who? Those people that come out to greet him. When Paul saw them, he thanked God and he took courage. Now, let me give you what has happened here. What has happened is about 3 years prior to this incident in Scripture, Paul had written a long letter to the Christians at this place where he's going. Do you know what book of the Bible that would be called? Romans. He writes a letter to the Christians in Rome. And in this letter, it's a long letter for Paul. It's probably his longest. And it was long, and it was important. It was important to Paul, and it was important to these Christians, these brothers and sisters that were there. But Paul, they didn't have this instant communication. No tweets, no emails, smoke signals and things. That was as good as it got back in that day. So Paul doesn't know how this letter that he wrote was received. How many of you have read or heard Romans taught or preached? It's not all pleasant. So Paul doesn't know how this letter was received. Paul doesn't know if these people are going to be glad. He don't know if they're glad coming out because they're glad to see him, or if they're coming out to head him on a different road, go to another place. He doesn't know. And he doesn't know whether or not they recognize the truth of the gospel that he laid out in the letter. And if you've not read Romans, you need to sit down and read it and find out what it says. But when Paul sees this group of believers coming out to meet him and to welcome him, you know what he knew? He knew that the Lord God of heaven had blessed the letter that he wrote to these people. He knew that. And listen, Paul needed to get to Rome. But this is a big one. We've all seen big with 2 T's on the end of it. This is a big with 1 T on the end of it. This is a big but. But before he gets there, some of you just caught that. Some of you wake up tonight when you lay down, oh, I got what the preacher said. It's kind of like our daughter. She's blonde-headed, or she was. That's our original. And we had revival one time, a long time ago. It was us youth pastor. And the evangelist, he got up and he said, if we have a certain number of people at church tonight, tomorrow night, whatever the case is, I'll sing Amazing Grace backwards. Well, we got that number. So he comes up and he walks out on the platform and he stands up there and he said, I made a promise to you last night that I would sing Amazing Grace backwards if we had whatever the challenge was. Amazing Grace. About 15 years later, Donna and Nicole are going somewhere. And Nicole's a passenger in the car, and she just breaks out laughing. And she says, I got it. And she said, got what? I got what Brother Sam did when he sang Amazing Grace backwards. 15 years later. But bless God, she got it. She got it. Now, Paul needs to get to Rome. But before he gets there, let me tell you what he needed. You ready for this? He needed to be appreciated. Now, every one of us in this room, we ought to be able to identify with that. He needed to be appreciated. And this bit of strength and this bit of encouragement that he gets from this group of people that come out as far as 40 some odd miles, and they walked. Don't you know that it encouraged him? These people walked 40 some odd miles to greet me and to welcome me to the city. Will Rogers made a statement one time, and he said this, quote, he said, we can't all be the heroes, because somebody has to sit on the curb and clap as the hero goes by. End quote. Along the road, as we follow Jesus, remember he's omni, and he knows when and where to put people to encourage us. He knows. Now, it may be you might be the hero. You might be the one walking. But it might be that you're the one that he calls to sit on the curb. And if you're one that you sit on the curb and you're the appreciator and not the appreciatee, you be the best appreciator that you can possibly be, because that one that's been through the battle, they need to be encouraged. And you may be the one to do that. So all of that happens while we're on the way, while we get there. Here's number 3. When we get there. We've seen why we get there. We've seen why we get there. So when we get there. Now, if you're not looking for it, we'll miss verse 16. And verse 16, Luke just says this. Now, when we came to Rome. Now, many months ago, a number of chapters ago, as far as it's written in the Bible, and many verses ago, Paul had set sail. He had set sail from Caesarea. And his intent was to get to this very place that Luke now writes. And now when we come to Rome, listen, Rome had been in his sights for a long time. Now this Rome is not the Rome that me and you picture. It's 800 years old. It's been an existing city for a long time. But it's not the same. When we think of Rome, especially what we call ancient Rome, what's the one big, massive building that we think of? Colosseum. It hadn't been built yet. It hasn't been built. The Colosseum's not there. The main buildings in Rome, the prominent buildings, are the Temple of Jupiter. That's one of them. It's Caesar's palace, says, because he has more than one. And then there's the temple to Mars, who is the little g god of war. The population of Rome was about 2 million. About 1 million were free people, and about 1 million were slaves. There were 3 classes of people. There was what we would call the upper class, and it was a very small class of people. Then there was a very large poor class. And then there were the slaves. So there were these three classes of people. Now he has finally gotten to the place where we're allowed to see something about what God has prepared for him once he arrives. Now when we get to where Jesus is leading us, we will find when we get there that he has gone ahead of us. Are you with me there? If he sends you somewhere, he's going ahead of you. Okay? That's the way he works. You remember when he left this earth? He said, I'm going away. He said, I'm going to prepare a place for you. So that means for all of these years, he's been at the right hand of the Father, and he's not on a construction crew. But he's up there with the Father, and he's gone ahead of us. And one day the Scripture says that he said, I'm going to come back and get you. He says, so that one day you can be where I am. He went ahead of us. When we walk through this world, he went ahead of us. He's done all of those things. Now, when we get to our Rome, whatever that place is, we can rest assured that wherever he leads us, he's going to go ahead of us. So with that in mind, when we get to our next place, or we get to our Rome, we can recognize that we could be surprised at God's providence. We could be surprised at God's providence. Now, if you got your Bible open, hold that passage, but turn back to Acts, the 19th chapter. And the 21st verse. Here's what it says. When these things were accomplished, Paul purposed in the Spirit, when he had passed through Macedonia and Achaia, to go to Jerusalem, saying, after I have been there, I must also see Rome. Now, in this letter that I mentioned a while ago that Paul had written about 3 years ago to the Christians in Rome that we call Romans, he had told them in Romans, what is now the first chapter, he had told them that he was looking forward to a prosperous journey by the will of God. Looking forward to a prosperous journey by the will of God. And the journey was so that he could come and see them. Because he wanted to see them. And years later, now that he comes to the place where he finally makes it to Rome, though he was allowed, he's a prisoner, and all the other prisoners were kept probably in a prison, but Paul is not kept in a prison. Paul is kept, he gets to stay at what we would call maybe a private residence. But he's shackled to a guard. That guard, if you were a staunch atheistic guard, you would not have wanted to draw the duty to be Paul's shacklemate. They changed him out. Some people say every 4 hours. Some people say every 6 hours. I tend to think it was probably 6. But could you imagine, Richard, how many times these guys heard about Jesus when they were shackled to old Paul? If they had sick days, they probably called in sick. They probably took vacation. But he was kept with a soldier. And all of these things happened. And Paul, as I mentioned earlier, I think that Paul had envisioned coming to Rome as a free man where he'd be able to do mission work, he'd be able to preach, he would be able to do the different things. But now he's come here and he is a prisoner and he is in the custody of Rome. But perhaps he was a bit surprised at how the providence of God played out in his life. Kent Hughes, in his commentary, he said this, let me quote him. He said, we must realize when we get to our Rome, the reality may not be what we had pictured. That's happened for most of us, hasn't it? The reality may not be what we pictured, but then Hughes goes on to say this. He says, but God's way is always better. God knows what he is doing. in the world. And I'm telling you, he still knows what he's doing. He still knows what he's doing. So as he gets us to where he is leading us, and it may not be the way that we pictured it, it may not be the way that we thought it was going to be, we can just remember that, man, he is still in control, and he is still in charge, and he is doing things better than it would have been if we had done so. So we might be surprised at the providence of God when we get to our home. Here's the last thing. You can be sure of God's plan. Now, Paul, he got saved. He began to preach. He goes off for a while, and I don't know what we'd call it, studies or whatever we'd call it. But since the time that he turned his life over to Christ, man, he has been busy. And there has been very little time when Paul had stopped moving. And so he's done all of these things, and from what we've seen of him here in the book of Acts, that it would be hard to imagine that his plan would have ever involved being under house arrest. That wouldn't have been Paul's plan. But we also know, you remember back in several weeks ago, when he was held prisoner for a long time, and then we began to look at what things were like in that part of the world. And had Paul been a free man, it was absolutely very possible, if not likely, that somebody would have just come along and killed Paul. So God kept him safe as a prisoner, because he kept him under watch and guard and all these things. So now Paul, he's restricted, and he was not. But even though he was restricted, he was not removed from the work of the kingdom of Jesus. So while he's there as a prisoner, you know what he gets to do? He gets to write some more letters. And you know what those letters were? They're books in our Bible. One of them's a letter to the Philippians. One of them is a letter to the church at Colossae, it's Colossians. One is to the church at Ephesus. You say, well, what difference does this make, preacher? Here's the deal. God, and God alone, but God can do as much with Paul under house arrest as Paul would have been able to do as a free man wandering around the streets of Rome. Now this is hard I start to say us, this is hard for me sometimes. But the sovereign plan of God called for the Apostle Paul to be a prisoner in Rome. I believe with all my heart, soul, and mind that it was the sovereign plan of God for that very thing to happen. I believe that. We might look at that and we say, well, that's not much of a providence. I wouldn't want that to happen, but I'm telling you, behind him being in house arrest, and behind him being a prisoner for all of these last several months as he's made this journey, there is not a frowning God sitting back there saying, well, I don't really know what happened. Here's what I believe. I believe that there is a smiling and a pleased God, that he is accomplishing his purpose through Paul, with Paul being a prisoner. Now hear me, and I'll quit. Everything in life is not always going to be happy. Everything in life is not always going to be easy. Nor does this book ever say that this world's going to be that way. Job, the oldest book in the Bible, says man's days are few and they're full of trouble. And that's still true. It's still true. But even though when we have to go through the hard times, there is a God in heaven who is leading us, even through things that we don't understand, to accomplish His will and His purpose in our life. To God be the glory. Great things He indeed has done and is doing today. Let's pray. Father, thank you. Thank you for this wonderful, wonderful story. And thank you through the presence of your blessed Spirit for making it so applicable to our lives. And Lord, to making it so plain. And God, I ask you to help us to understand. There are no Apostle Pauls in this room. I'm certainly not one. But Lord, we're just a group of people who love you. And I pray that we're trying to follow you. And I pray that we will allow you to lead us and to guide us and to direct us, not just to the next stage of our life, but through every stage of our life. And that you will be able to accomplish and get glory from everything that might take place in and through our lives. There's not an accident. There's not a wasted day. There's not a wasted hour, because you are working to fulfill your purpose and your plan in my life. And I pray that I will be submissive to you and not try to make my own way, but I will be submissive to your way and allow you to lead me. What a wonderful, blessed thought. Bless us as we depart this place tonight. I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.